Duty is now in the hands of one of the world's biggest corporations. With older Call of Duty titles now out of commission, and with recent titles being on the decline, this truly begs the question, can Microsoft actually save one of the most famed gaming franchises ever made? Alright, now point number one on how Microsoft can save Call of Duty is with the Xbox Game Pass. Now, if you guys aren't familiar with what Xbox Game Pass is, it's basically a subscription service similar to how Xbox Live and PS Plus work. You basically pay a certain amount of money a month. So, for example, you pay $20 and you have access to a full catalog of games on both an Xbox and on Windows. And starting with Black Ops 6, with every Call of Duty moving forward, Microsoft is going to have every Call of Duty on Xbox Game Pass starting at launch. And this basically means that you don't have to pay $70 and you only access one game. You can pay $20 a month and you can access all the older Call of Duties as well. And I think that that is good because let's say, for example, um, someone is thinking about playing the new Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and they're really excited. Instead of spending $70 to be able to access the game and maybe they like it, maybe they don't, and don't end up liking it, they're down $70. And $70 isn't cheap, especially in today's economy. A lot of people understand that. But instead, if you only pay $20 for just a month and you try it for a month and you say, hey, listen, I'm not really a big fan of this Call of Duty, you're just down $20 instead of the full 70. Plus, with the $20, you have access to other games as well. And eventually, Microsoft will roll out the older Call of Duty titles. I think that the way they're going to implement it is basically based on what game developer is releasing a Call of Duty title that year. So obviously this year, Black Ops game's coming out, so that means that Treyarch's developing the game. So maybe throughout the life cycle of Black Ops 6, they're going to roll out like Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, Black Ops 3, Black Ops 4, and Black Ops Cold War as well. And eventually maybe World at War. And obviously you'll still have the option to purchase the game for $70. But I think that this is huge because it shows the amount of support. Everything's under one roof instead of you having to go onto the Xbox store or run to your local GameStop or your local Walmart in hopes of finding a good deal. I think that what Microsoft is doing with Call of Duty, especially on Xbox Game Pass, is a huge plus. And this is point number one on how I think Microsoft can save Call of Duty. All right, now moving on to point number two on how Microsoft can save Call of Duty is the support for the future of this game. Now, obviously, um, the way that Call of Duty used to work before Microsoft acquired Activision Blizzard was they release Call of Duties every year, and so the Call of Duty's each Call of Duty's lifespan was about 1 year. Two, if your game was really good and the new Call of Duty kind of sucked. So kind of worked with like Black Ops 3, for example. They released Zombies Chronicles, well into its second year of its life cycle, and people still play it. Obviously, it doesn't get nearly as many updates. Doesn't get any updates at all. And so with Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard and Call of Duty by extension, what can happen is um the Microsoft's gaming division can have a certain amount of people assigned to Treyarch, a certain amount of people assigned to Infinity Ward, and a certain amount of people assigned to Sledgehammer. And what these extra people can do is they can provide patches, they can provide network updates, they can provide, and they can fix the games. And so this is good because there were actually mods of people trying to fix the older Call of Duty so people will go back to them. I believe they did it for Black Ops 2 and the original Modern Warfare 2. Not the one that came out in 2022, but the one that came out way back in 2011. And Activision, being the butt heads that they are, totally shut down these mods. And I think that they thought that prevent people from buying the new Call of Duties. And that is absolutely not the case. I know a lot of people that would want to play the old Call of Duties. I really want to play the old Call of Duties. I still love playing Black Ops 3. And it sucks because there's a lot of hackers on there. And so I think that with the extra people working on each of these games, I think that they can actually provide support as well as focus on the new Call of Duty games and not just um, have to forget about those as well. And that's another good thing. The current Call of Duties, they have more employees, so they can have more people working on supporting the games and making sure that the best quality product is put out for the consumers. And so I think that there's going to be more support for Call of Duty moving forward as long as they're under Microsoft's supervision. Obviously, the software team isn't totally responsible. They're not at all responsible for what's going on over at Call of Duty, but the people in the gaming division are. And I think that with the knowledge that the gaming division has, they can apply that to the Call of Duties moving forward. And so I think that this is point number two on how Microsoft can save Call of Duty. Starting off with point number three on how Microsoft can save Call of Duty, is with the implementation of cross-platform and cross-generation play. Now, obviously, starting in Modern Warfare 2019, I don't know if this came out at release or if this came out a month or two into the game's life cycle. But basically, what it is you basically have the ability to play. If you're on a PlayStation 4, for example, which is my case, you have the ability to play with your friends on Xbox and on PC, and you also had the ability to toggle on and off that stuff. So if you just wanted to play with your PS4 players, you could do that. Or if you wanted to play with everybody, you could do that as well. Now, that is really important because it not only shows that Call of Duty cares about everybody, it also increases the player count as well. And I think that that is very, very important for Call of Duty's moving forward, because with the ability for people to play on separate consoles and still play together, that's huge. Because if I have a PS5 and my buddy has an Xbox Series X, I won't have to pay $500 to buy an Xbox, or he won't have to pay $500 for to play on the PS, just for us to be able to play Call of Duty together. We can do that now, and it's also good because starting in Cold War when the PS5 came out, if I had a PS5 and my buddy just still has the Xbox One, we can still play Call of Duty together, and that's really important for the player fan base. Not to say that it doesn't incentivize people to move to the newer consoles, because it absolutely does because of the superior graphics. But if you're having trouble with getting a new console, if you really can't afford one, this is a huge plus, and I think that what Call of Duty has done is absolutely incredible with this. Obviously, this was before Microsoft, but what Microsoft can do is they can add this feature to the older Call of Duty. So if I have Xbox Advanced Warfare, for example, on a PS, and I want to play with my buddy who has Advanced Warfare on, say, an Xbox, we can totally do that. And I don't know how difficult this feature is to implement, but if it's not a terribly difficult feature to implement, I think that Microsoft should do it. Obviously, this also banks on the fact that Sony adds backwards compatibility to their consoles as well. This is a luxury that Sony users cannot afford, myself included. I would really love to have the backwards compatibility feature that Xbox users have. But as long as Sony does their thing and Microsoft does their thing, I think that Call of Duty will have a better future. This is point number three on how I think Microsoft can save Call of Duty. All right, moving on to point number one on how I think Microsoft will not be able to save Call of Duty is with the monopoly that they've created. Essentially, a monopoly is basically when there's only um one company making a certain consumable item or certain product. So let's say, for example, Toyota is the only manufacturer of automobiles in the entire world, or Apple is the only manufacturer of smartphones. That's a monopoly. There's no healthy competition. There's no incentive to put out good quality products. And this applies to Microsoft because obviously during the 2000s and in the 2010s, before Battlefield really broke onto the scene, Call of Duty and Halo were really going at each other's necks for who would be able to put out a better FPS game. And now that both games are under Microsoft supervision, Microsoft doesn't really have an incentive to put out the best quality games. They can just put out like a middle of the pack quality game, and people will still buy it. But this is an issue, obviously, because it's not good for the economy, and it's also not good for people that want to play a very good Call of Duty. Because obviously, as I mentioned, in years past, Call of Duty hasn't really lived up to the hype that people have expected. Obviously, it wasn't nearly as good as it was back in like the 2010s. That was like the golden age for Call of Duty. But hopefully this doesn't come true, and I hope that Microsoft actually realizes that they need to start putting out better quality games, and I think that they will. But again, this is something to be concerned about simply due to the fact that Microsoft now owns two of the three major FPS games in the entire world. Obviously, Call of Duty and Halo, they don't have the rights to Battlefield, but this is a huge issue that I hope that Microsoft will address publicly coming soon, and I hope they will say that um listen, we're not here to create a monopoly. We're here to actually pump out the best quality content that we absolutely can, and make sure that all the consumers, all the Call of Duty fans are at their absolute happiest. And so, yeah, that is point number one on how I think Microsoft will not be able to save Call of Duty. All right, now moving on to the last point. Point number two on how I don't think Microsoft will be able to save Call of Duty is with the lack of support, or rather, the potential lack of support for PlayStation users. So, basically, obviously, Microsoft owns the rights to Call of Duty, and Sony does not. But Microsoft and Sony have agreed to a binding agreement, which is basically both sides have to hold up their end of the deal. Microsoft has agreed to a binding agreement with Sony that says that we need to allow Call of Duty to be on the PlayStation platform for the next 10 years. So for the next decade, Call of Duty will be um, available on PlayStation to purchase. Um, but I don't know that beyond the contractual obligation that Microsoft has to this deal, I don't know that they're legally obligated to actually support PlayStation games. Obviously, Microsoft, I believe they said that they will support Call of Duty on the PlayStation, but I don't know how much they will support it. I don't know if they'll provide constant um hot um hot fixes, hot patches, updates, like network fixes, like they will on Microsoft, because obviously they have a duty and obligation to their own fan base as opposed to the a competitor's fan base, which I totally understand. But still, the rivalry between Sony and PlayStation really keeps the gaming industry moving forward. And again, that creates that healthy competition that I was talking about earlier. And a lot of people play Sony. So I believe 60 as of June of this year, 61.5 million people own a PlayStation 5. I'm one of those 61.5 million people, and about 28.2 million people own an Xbox Series X and an Xbox Series S. I totally understand why Microsoft would want to support their own consoles more, so that more people go onto Xbox as opposed to stick with PlayStation. But I don't know that a lot of people will be interested in paying $500 for a Series X or $300 for a Series S. Um, and they'll just stop playing Call of Duty. That is a huge killer. That'll kill off a huge, huge chunk of the fan base. And again, I don't know that Microsoft will do this. They're usually pretty smart enough not to do that. But again, you never know with how corporations are creating monopolies nowadays, with how um, little competition there is in certain industries. So I really hope that Microsoft holds up their end of the deal and actually provides true support for PlayStation and doesn't actually screw the future of Call of Duty over. Given that Call of Duty's already kind of digging its grave, it's been digging its grave for the past couple of years. But that's enough of my thoughts. I want to know, what do you guys think? Do you guys think that the acquisition of one of the best gaming franchises ever by one of the biggest corporations ever is going to save Call of Duty, or is it going to actually dig their grave and Call of Duty will be totally 6 feet under within the next 3 to 4 years? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Thank you all so much for the support on the recent content. I'm almost at 100 subs, and I would really appreciate if you could drop a like, drop a sub, and hit a follow on my social media. I will drop the link down to that in the description below. Thank you all so much for watching. This is Stuger signing off. Peace out.